Welcome to CGTN. You're watching a special roundtable. I'm Li Qiuyuan, coming to you from the beautiful city of Suzhou in East China. Today, we're joined by leading minds in the cultural sector and trailblazing museum professionals as they gather here to attend the second China Museum Studies Conference. Together, we would like to explore how museums can become engines of real cross-civilization dialogue and why that matters now more than ever. But before we get started, let me introduce to you my awesome panel today. Please welcome Dr. Jay Xu, Director and CEO Emeritus at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. Welcome.
Hello.
We're also joined by Ms. Danielle Schulz-Moffat, Associate Director of Lifelong Learning and Accessibility at the Denver Art Museum. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We're also joined by Ms. Zhan Bighan, Program Specialist for Culture at UNESCO Regional Office for East Asia. Welcome.
Hello.
Last but not least, Professor Patricia Roldwald, Visiting Professor at the China Central Academy of Fine Arts, former Director of Education at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
So this is a beautiful city near Shanghai. It has a history of over 2,500 years. Welcome to Suzhou. Welcome to China. Why don't I start with your impression of the city and this trip so far? Let me start with you, Professor. What do you find most interesting about this gathering?
Well, I'm familiar with Suzhou and have visited many of the ancient sites, the older sites, the historical sites. But here we're in the West Suzhou area, and so I'm just amazed by all of the new growth in Suzhou. And so I'm experiencing a wonderful blend of old and new.
Oh yeah. And Ms. Zhan, you know, Suzhou actually is famous for its classical gardens. 9 of them are actually UNESCO sites, right? What stood out to you the most so far?
Yes, same as Patricia. I've been to Suzhou many times, and we work very closely with WITRAP Suzhou, which is one of the UNESCO Cultural Tour Center here. So mostly I've been in the old town. So it is really great to be here and see the new side of Suzhou and see how the city blends traditions and innovation and modernity.
Right, so we've got returning visitors, and Ms. Moffat, I understand this is your first time visiting Suzhou.
It is, and my first time visiting China as well. It is incredible. I've loved my time here at Suzhou. I have went to the Suzhou West Museum yesterday, and it was just incredible to see the integration of nature into the galleries, and that is something that I know it helps my well-being, and so I'm really excited to see how that is being integrated into museums here.
That's wonderful. And Dr. Xu, I overheard your conversation in your hometown. You said, is Shanghai?
Was Shanghai.
That's very close. How do you feel about this trip so far?
Wow, Suzhou is such a beautiful city. Whenever I think of it, the words of beauty, elegance, poetry come to my mind. And last night, which was the last day of the wonderful exhibition called From the Garden of a Humble Administrator to Garden of Monet in the Suzhou Museum West. And the exhibition was excellent. It captures the essence of Suzhou as a garden city, as a city that's full of history, but also elegance, and also the people's way of life is so poetic. So it is a great honor to be here. And people sometimes like to describe Suzhou as the Venice of the East.
Yes,
and I like to offer an alternative. Venice should be known as the Suzhou of the West. After all, Marco Polo came to China.
And Dr. Xu, you actually gave a speech this morning at the conference. What are you hoping to achieve through this gathering?
Yeah, the museum field in China is developing rapidly, arguably the fastest in the world. As we know, almost there's more than 1 museum opening every day. And so China is really paying a great deal of attention to the well-being of the population through the museum engagement, museum as a platform of serving the public. So I'm delighted to be here to share some of my experience, but more importantly, to know more what's the museum practice at current time being is going on in China. And I think it's very promising. You know, all kinds of subjects will be discussed under the same common theme of sustainable future. And that's the future we're looking at.
What about you, Ms. Mofat? Any interesting topics that you found most eye-catching to you at this year's conference?
I am so excited that in so many conversations today and continuing throughout the conference, the link to sustainability is about social inclusion and thinking about the inclusion of people with disabilities. And that has been just a very inspiring theme that I've seen run through this conference, is really looking at how people with disabilities are at the center of our communities. And so how are we thinking about museums as those bearers of culture to be welcoming spaces for those? So I'm just so excited to see that as the central theme here.
And Ms. Zhan, your thoughts on this?
I joined Danielle. For the past 2 years, our office has been working with the China Museum Association on the topic of inclusivity and accessibility. And this morning, we just launched the guideline for museum accessibility in China. So this is really one of the topics we would like to raise awareness and also to build consensus and to find way forward to make sure that all museums in China can be accessible and inclusive to all people, to all gender, to all ages, and to all abilities.
And Professor, what stood out to you the most?
Well, one of the things that was mentioned this morning, and I think is being discussed this afternoon and will be tomorrow afternoon, is the development of museum studies in China with Chinese characteristics. And I think it's an exciting time when the field is becoming more mature, it's growing, and I look forward to seeing the directions that it's going to go.
And as we're here to talk about museums, I would like to get your vision for the future, what the museum of the future would look like. Ms. Mofat, if you were to describe the future museums in a set of keywords, what would they be and why?
Yeah. I think human-centered would be the first one. So thinking about the artifacts and what is being presented, but also who is coming to the museum and what are their needs with needing to interact with these. Curious, so I think as we're seeing innovation and things change so rapidly, so how museums can continue to be curious, to ask questions of their visitors and of their participants, what are the things they need to engage and how do they want to connect to these. So I think curious and human-centered are really how I see the museums of the future.
Human-centered, curious, Dr. Xu?
Yes, I totally agree, human-centered, but I like to also use the word experience that to illustrate how important human-centered approach is. We human beings come to this world with nothing. We live in the world without anything, but we always create, we'll always take, and we'll own our experiences. So how the museum can engage the public, create the unique, inspiring experiences so that museum visitors can see themselves in the museums and have a real sense of ownership of the museum.
And Ms. Zhan, how could museum use multilateral mechanisms, cooperation platforms such as APEC to foster dialogue among different cultures?
I think the platform like APEC would really provide a very valuable opportunity for making connection among the museums. UNESCO, and maybe I'd like to use this opportunity to highlight the 2015 UNESCO recommendation concerning the protection and promotion of museum and collections, their diversity and their role in the society. And the recommendations really encourage the museums to make better connection among each other. And UNESCO has been organizing 3 times now, all hosted in China, the high-level forums for museums, where all the directors of museums all over the world coming together to discuss the latest achievement, latest challenges, latest opportunities. So these opportunities are very, very important to exchange not only the collection, but also the methodology, the capacity, or the theories to really move the museum sector forward.
Professor, let me poke your brain on this. How do you think, what kind of unique roles could museums play in fostering genuine cultural exchanges among different civilizations? What are the things about museums that no other TikTok feeds or pop-up galleries or policy summits could ever replicate?
Well, museums hold in trust for the public actual objects and works of art, and those are concrete connections to people in the past, people in other places, and so museums, I think that the power of objects to move people, to instill and inspire awe in us is something that is unique to museums. And I think we will always have that, that powerful role in society.
And Dr. Xu, any international collaboration or successful cases of that between museums across the world that you could share with us? Any successful models or cases that have promoted, for example, artifact exchange or joint curations?
Yeah, I think the experience is, again, the key to the success of a culture exchange. Now, let me use one example of what we did in the Asian Art Museums in 2014. We showcased the world-famous terracotta warrior. That exhibition is always successful without any promotion because it's world-famous. For such a well-known artifacts showcasing in San Francisco, how we make it relatable, and particularly audience can see themselves in that exhibition. We came upon the theme of immortality. The first emperor of China built this wonderful, magnificent mausoleum to ensure immortality in the next life. But each of us, no matter how little we are, we can achieve immortality. If you are the best teacher, you achieve immortality by training the best students. If you are a community volunteer, you help the elderly and disabled to prolong their life, to maintain a healthy, happy life, you achieve immortality. So every walks of life, every one of us can achieve immortality. So we encourage the audience, the visitors, to bear on this theme when they go through the exhibition, to enjoy wonderful art from China across the ocean, from a remote time. So people can really relate, in this case, with the theme and the story behind the story of the terracotta warrior.
Make it relatable to the audiences. That
Exactly.
really works.
Yeah.
And Ms. Mofat, you're an expert on accessibility. Can you share with us how you usually design an accessible exhibition at Denver Art Museum and what makes it uniquely different?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of these practices are going to what has been mentioned here is how are you connecting people with exhibitions and with what they are seeing. And so thinking at first from the visitor. So what are the needs that people who might not be able to see or might not be able to hear language or might have mobility devices or mobility needs, what are they needing? So thinking about spaces that have enough or exhibitions that have enough space for people to move around in their wheelchairs. We were talking yesterday about also heights of artwork when it's hung too high, how can people see it? So thinking about lowering things, thinking about also the information that is being shared, how is that being supported for people who might have some cognitive limitations to still understand what is the key ideas of that's being told here. Providing ways to engage with the artwork that you can through touch or through sensory explorations, and then also finding those ways to connect to experiences. How are these things important to the people who made them, but also those who are appreciating them and seeing them? So really connecting in those ways. And when you say that together, it doesn't seem that different or that unique. It's just that when you're thinking about the visitor from the very beginning, you're adding in these accessible design features, this tactile elements, these auditory elements from the very beginning, so that they're more seamlessly integrated into the design, and that way it is access for all, versus when it's added after the fact, and then it's cobbled together, or it doesn't look as well made. And so I think those are the large ones. And then what we're doing now that seems kind of innovative and new is really having our community members with disabilities helping us to shape these programs. So we have working groups with people with disabilities who are working with us right now to develop a new gallery chair. So some type of chair like this that might be in galleries that could support people with different needs. And so having the community members with disabilities being there at the forefront of that design process feels innovative and new.
That's very impressive. And Ms. Zahn, now, digital technology is already reshaping how museums communicate, exhibit, or operate. How do you think museums in China and around the world should accelerate their digital or intelligent transformation to face up the challenge, to adapt to our times?
I think there are two issues that UNESCO especially focuses on. First is the ethics of AI. UNESCO member states adopted the 2021 recommendations on ethics of AI that has a great relevance to the museum sector, where AI technologies should complement and not replace the human creativity, human curiosity. I heard that one of the panels spoke about before, empathy, shared understanding, how to ensure the cultural diversity is being continued to promote it and with no bias or no exclusion. So the issues of ethics, I think it should really be continue to be at the top of the line. The second one is the capacity of museum professionals and the communities to harness all this technology, all this AI for the development of museums so that it can be inclusive, because in many cases when we talk about technology, the culture sector lags behind a bit because the culture professionals are not fully equipped. So in that sense, I think that would really be a focus that we could continue to work together. And lastly, from my observation, I think China is one of the very advanced countries in terms of applying technology and AI to museums. And I think that the documentation of all these experiences from China can be really useful to share internationally.
Right, and we're reaching out to a younger audience, Professor. How can we make the experience more appealing to them, to make history or cultural heritage less like a lecture, but more like a conversation that they can join, they can enjoy, remix, and share?
Well, one of the things that we talk about with collections and with exhibitions is that they tell stories. And so most exhibitions are designed, or many are designed in that way. And I tend to think of exhibitions not just as the works of art in the collection and the interpretation and the design, but also the programming that happens as part of the exhibition. It's really one big experience for visitors. So in that, in those programs, it's an opportunity for us to work with contemporary artists, for example. And when I was working in Atlanta at the High Museum of Art, we had an exhibition of the 20th century surrealist painter Salvador Dali. And we stayed open all night, and we had all kinds of things going on, including a local circus that was performing in the atrium space, which related to Salvador Dali and some of his experiences. And also we had contemporary artists who painted canvas dresses, and then we had a fashion show showing those. So meeting people where their interests are, engaging them in new ways in museums can be a way of becoming more relevant and connecting with younger audiences.
Right. Now, coming back to accessibility, Ms. Mofat, what are some of the common challenges that museums around the world are facing when they implement comprehensive accessibilities?
Well, what's so difficult is accessibility is really, it's so comprehensive, it's so large, and museums of all different sizes being able to say we can be accessible for every single person and every single need is very difficult, because that means how are we thinking about people who cannot see, cannot hear? There's sometimes too many things to do that it becomes overwhelming. And when museums don't have the resources, or as we've talked about, maybe the staff who know what to create or how to maintain it, it can become something that is insurmountable. So thinking about really tapping into the local community and saying who are the people who are at our doorstep, and what are they looking for, and starting there, and then starting to spread out into more communities, because then that shows this kind of incremental growth that can be added onto versus having to do everything all at once. So kind of that building up and that scaffolding feels like a very important step for museums of all sizes to recognize.
Right. Now, earlier we opened up the discussion by asking Ms. Mofat and Dr. Xu to share their keywords about future museums, what they would look like. Let me circle back on that and get your take, Professor Roldwald and Ms. Zong. Let me get your take on the few keywords if you were to use them to describe the future museum. Professor first.
Well, I think probably I'm going to repeat a few things here, but that may be telling. I think innovative is a key characteristic of museums in the future. And of course, museums have always been innovative and will continue to be. So that's one word I would use. Creative is another one. I think that museum work and museum experiences can all be very creative, engaging visitors. and also relevant to our public so that we can be valued by the public. And I think those would be important.
What about you, Ms. Zahn?
I think I'll pick some of the words that had been mentioned before, inclusive and participatory. Museums have long gone about, not just about the collection, it is really a space where everyone, we mentioned about artists, creative artists and communities and museum professionals, historians, anthropologists come together to really co-create. It's the platform for education, for participation, so for all the stakeholders to shape the narratives together. It's not just to represent one group or voices or one perspective. And another word I would use is sustainable. I think eventually it would be really good if the museum could be socially sustainable, financially sustainable, environmentally sustainable to align with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Now we've got a bit more time. Finally, before I let you guys go, what do you feel are the key messages from this conference, or something that you would like the attendees to take away from this gathering, Dr. Xu?
I would say that the sustainability of a museum lies in its human-centered approach. The kind of keywords I like to use, museum for all. And in future, our public, our visitors will become active agent in shaping and develop their experience in the museums. And museum professionals are working hand in hand with our community in developing those experiences.
Ms. Mova?
Yeah, what I would add on to that, what I really heard was innovation, but innovation coupled with process evaluation and or process evolution. So understanding that we can be innovative, but again, if we want to have these practices be consistent across thousands of museums that are across China and then even the world, there has to be processes that support those. And so though that is not the most fun and wonderful words, but that those are how consistency happens, and consistency equals inclusion.
Ms. Zahn?
Yeah, again, I think museum is really a space for all. It is really where everyone can come to enjoy, to make the differences, and to connect with each other.
What about you, Professor?
I was just going to say, Danielle mentioned evaluation, and I think that actually it's going to be important that we do research on these experiments that we're doing with the public, and we evaluate how successful are they, because that will help us to continuously improve and move in new directions with our work.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time talking to us. We really appreciate your insights and analysis and perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And to our viewers who are watching this, thank you so much for a company that does it for this special roundtable here on CGTN. I'm Li Qiuyuan coming to you from Suzhou. Until next time, bye-bye.